Audiences are lining up, again, for a long historical gamble. The World War II drama Pressure is scheduled for a United Kingdom theatrical release in September 2026, and the appetite around it is not mysterious. People still want a darkened room, a nation under strain, and the feeling that a fortune was spent to make the past look inevitable. Studios still answer that appetite with steel, water, extras, and debt. There is a stretch of Los Angeles that remembers what happens when the appetite outruns the treasury. Century City rises where 20th Century Fox once kept its backlot. Glass, traffic, law firms. Under the sidewalks sits a quieter fact. The studio sold that land because a single production would not stop consuming cash. The production was Cleopatra, released in 1963. It began as a $2 million remake. It bloated into a $44 million emergency. Fox shut down nearly every other picture on its slate to keep this one alive. Then it sold the ground beneath its own standing sets to stay solvent. The land became an office district. The movie became a legend of excess. The sets were meant to be temporary. The sale was permanent.
Fox kept the name and lost the acreage that had made the name feel like a country. And still, the marquee told a different story. Cleopatra was the highest-grossing film of 1963. The public paid. The title worked. Glory and insolvency arrived in the same fiscal year. The break-even point sat so high that a box office crown could not, by itself, replace the cash already burned. The studio survived the immediate crisis by liquidating core physical real estate, not by trusting ticket windows to refill a hole that large. That is the contradiction this story follows. A planned remake, $1 million star, cameras that started before the pages were finished, London weather that treated antiquity as a joke, a president who thought scale was a form of safety, a ledger that proved him wrong. Hollywood loves to say a movie saved or killed a studio. Most of those sentences are advertising. This one is closer to a deed of sale. When you look at Century City, you are looking at the price of finishing Cleopatra.
By the late 1950s, 20th Century Fox still photographs like an empire and behaves like a company losing the room. Television has parked itself in American living rooms. Weekly attendance, once a civic habit, has been sliding for a decade. Antitrust decrees have already broken the old vertical machine. Fox can no longer treat theaters as a captive utility. It has to seduce the public one event at a time. Spyros Skouras understands seduction as architecture. He is not a poet of cinema. He is a theater man who rose through Nickelodeons and Palace screens, and he has already placed one large bet that worked. In 1953, Fox pushed CinemaScope into the bloodstream with The Robe, a biblical spectacle designed to make a living room set look small. Widescreen was a weapon against the cathode ray tube. For a few years, the weapon paid. Then the returns thin. Darryl F. Zanuck, the production lion who had defined the studio's house style, steps away from day-to-day power in 1956. The lot still sprawls across western Los Angeles like a private county. The overhead does not shrink when the audience does. Empty sound stages cost money, even when they are silent.
A studio of this size needs a reason to exist every quarter, not every decade. Walter Wanger arrives with a reason that sounds almost modest. Remake Cleopatra. Fox already owns the ghost of the story. Theda Bara burned through a silent version in 1917. Claudette Colbert played the Queen in 1934. The title is a brand before marketing departments lean on that word. Wanger is a producer with taste and a talent for persuading executives that taste can be budgeted. The first internal picture of the project is not a ruinous epic. It is a $2 million reset. Enough satin to photograph, enough Egypt to suggest, not enough ambition to threaten the fiscal year. That is the historical blind spot. Later generations remember the film as if someone set out to build the most expensive motion picture on Earth. The early paperwork points somewhere colder. Fox set out to copy a hit pattern at a discount. MGM's Ben-Hur had opened in 1959 and turned a chariot race into a financial argument. Roadshow exhibition, reserved seats, intermissions, souvenir programs, elevated ticket prices made a long picture feel like an occasion.
executives across town drew the wrong clean line. Antiquity plus duration plus spectacle equals solvency. Skouras greenlights the remake because he needs an occasion with his own logo on it. He needs something that can travel as an event through the circuits he still understands. He also needs to prove that Fox, after Zanuck's departure, can manufacture importance. A queen is useful for that. A queen is photogenic. A queen can be sold before a page of dialogue is locked. What most accounts skip is how unfinished the plan is at the moment of yes. There is a title, there is a producer, there is a budget number that looks like discipline. There is not a stable shooting script. There is not a climate strategy for a production that will, in its first incarnation, try to manufacture the Nile under English cloud. The greenlight is a political act inside a frightened company, not a completed design. Fox in these years is already leaking from other wounds. Prestige pictures slip, contracts sit heavy. The Backlot, which looks like an asset in publicity stills, is a cash furnace if it is not turning. Some men inside the company already whisper that the land under the plaster streets might be worth more as real estate than as make-believe.
That whisper is not yet policy. It is a smell in the accounting wing. So the studio does what frightened studios do. It enlarges the bet that was supposed to be small. If the public wants Rome, give them more Rome. If rivals are selling hard-ticket biblical hours, do not arrive with a trim programmer and a second-tier cast. The original frame begins to absorb vanity the way dry timber absorbs heat. Each meeting adds a reason to wait for a bigger star, a better director, a more imperial design. None of that is fate. It is a sequence of incentives. Skouras needs a victory large enough to silence the board. Wanger needs a production that justifies his return to the center of the industry. The sales department needs a title that theater owners will treat as a pilgrimage. Everyone in the room can point to a rival's chariot and call caution a failure of nerve. The caution they refuse is simple. A remake without locked pages is not a remake, it is an open account. Weather is not an aesthetic problem, it is a compound interest problem. A star hired as insurance can become the most expensive clause in the building. In 1959 and early 1960, those sentences are still theoretical.
They will not stay theoretical for long. The company has chosen scale as a sedative. It has chosen a queen because queens photograph like certainty. It has not chosen a method for stopping. Elizabeth Taylor does not enter this story as decoration. She enters it as a financial instrument. In 1960, she is already a weather system. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Suddenly Last Summer have made her the rare performer who can open a picture on name alone. She also lives and works in a tax geography that pulls production toward Europe. If Fox wants her, Fox will not casually summon her to a California stage and call that logistics. She asks for $1 million. No film actor has been paid that number as a salary. Skouras agrees. The contract does not stop at the headline. After 16 weeks, overtime is structured at $50,000 a week. There is a cut of the gross. Every extra day is not a nuisance. It is a multiplier with her name on it. Wanger and Skouras tell themselves they have purchased certainty. What they have actually purchased is a clock that charges interest. The psychology is not mysterious if you sit in their chairs. A frightened studio cannot sell a discount queen. The enlargement of the project, once Taylor is attached, starts to feel rational after the fact. You do not pay $1 million and then economize the barges.
You pay $1 million and then order more barges, because the barges now have to look like they belong beside that number. Ruben Mamoulian is hired to direct. He is a craftsman of prestige, a man of control and polish, the wrong temperament for a script that will not sit still. He is asked to conjure Alexandria before the scenes have hardened. That request is not an accident. Delay, in Skouras' mind, is to greater danger. A start date is a press release. A start date holds the star, the exhibitors, the board. Pages can be rewritten at night. Weather can be endured. Those are the private sentences that move a camera before a story is finished. Wanger's motive is restoration. He wants back inside the center of American picture making, and a queen with Taylor's face is a door. Skouras' motive is survival, dressed as grandeur. He has already sold the industry on width as destiny. He now needs a subject large enough to justify the width.
Mamoulian's motive is authorship, which is the first motive the production will punish. Taylor's motive is leverage, fairly used. She knows what she is worth in a market that has few substitutes, and she prices that scarcity without apology.
One life or death decision hides inside the glamour. They will begin in London, at Pinewood, as if England can stand in for the Eastern Mediterranean if the plaster is thick enough. Another hides beside it. They will treat the unfinished screenplay as a living document rather than a gate. A third sits in the overtime clause. 16 weeks is not a generous runway for antiquity. It is a tripwire. Nobody in that room is trying to destroy 20th Century Fox. That is the uncomfortable part. They are trying to buy safety at a price that looks like courage. Skouras wants a monument that will make the television set look cheap again. Taylor wants the number that proves she is not interchangeable. Wenger wants a classic with his name above the wreckage of earlier careers. Each incentive is locally sane. Stacked together, they form a machine that cannot idle. Once the salary is public, retreat looks like humiliation. Once the start date is announced, unfinished pages look like a scheduling detail. Once Europe is chosen, English Rain becomes a production partner with veto power. The studio has not merely hired a star. It has hired a set of conditions under which stopping will cost nearly as much as continuing. And then the cameras are expected to roll, as if rolling were the same thing as knowing what the movie is. September 1960, Pinewood. The sky over Buckinghamshire does the one thing a desert picture cannot afford. It stays English. Alexandria has been built to be photographed in gold. It is photographed in pewter. Costumes darken. Plaster sickens. Extras wait in drizzle while Mamoulian waits for pages that arrive like rumors. Peter Finch is Caesar. Stephen Boyd is Antony. The footage accumulates without becoming a film. There is motion. There is not inevitability. Taylor falls ill. The illness is not a tabloid flourish. It becomes pneumonia. In March 1961, in a London hospital, surgeons cut a tracheotomy into her throat to keep her breathing. For a stretch of days, the most expensive asset on the Fox ledger is a woman fighting for air. Production collapses. The English sets, paid for in full, are stranded like a navy in the wrong climate. Millions are already gone. Almost nothing can be kept. And then, everything breaks. Mamoulian is out. Joseph L. Mankiewicz is in, hired not only to direct, but to write a new picture on the grave of the old one. The cast is torn open. Rex Harrison becomes Caesar. Richard Burton becomes Antony. The production flees England for Cinecittà in Rome, where a second Alexandria must be raised from nothing because the first Alexandria was weather. Fox is now paying for Egypt twice, and for a script the second time, and for a star whose overtime clause has already begun to smile. Rome does not cool the fever. It changes the fever's color. Mankiewicz works himself toward exhaustion, feeding scenes to the camera as he writes them, a scholar trying to outrun a payroll. The sets are vast enough to look like foreign policy. Barges, temples, crowds, a city of carpenters whose only export is illusion. Each day has a burn rate that would have financed the original remake several times over. Burton and Taylor find each other in front of the company, and then in front of the world. The affair is a moral panic in the papers and a perverse form of marketing in the sales offices. A Vatican-linked newspaper denounces the scandal. Columnists feast. Exhibitors lick their lips and also ask who is paying for the delay. Publicity is not cash. It is oxygen that still has to be purchased by the hour. Inside Fox, the rest of the slate begins to die so this one organism can keep eating. Pictures are shelved. Crews are released. The lot in Los Angeles goes quiet in rooms that have nothing to do with the Nile. Executives discover the oldest mechanism in industrial failure, a single open account that is too famous to close and too hungry to share. Cash leaves the company the way heat leaves an uninsulated house. There is no mystery in the physics. There is only the refusal to lock the door. Skouras, who greenlit a remake and received a siege, loses the room. In 1962, the board's patience completes its long subtraction. Zanuck returns from independent producing with The Longest Day as his exhibit of competence,
a war film brought in with something like adult supervision. He uses that contrast like a blade. Skouras is pushed upward and aside. The founder-era theater man who believed spectacle could outshout television is replaced by the old production boss who believes unfinished epics are a form of insolvency. Zanuck inherits a choice with no clean edge. Kill Cleopatra, and the already spent fortune becomes a pure loss, a public confession, a write-off large enough to take the share price with it.
Finish Cleopatra, and the burn continues. But there is at least a product that can be roadshown, advertised, amortized. He chooses the second wound. Finishing is not hope, it is triage. While the cameras grind in Italy, Fox sells the ground under its American identity. Roughly 260 acres of the Los Angeles lot go to the Aluminum Company of America and its development partners, a transaction measured in the same altitude of millions as the picture itself. The studio keeps a reduced campus. The rest is earmarked for a private city of towers. The irony is not literary, it is arithmetic. To keep a movie about imperial display from taking the company under, Fox liquidates the physical empire that made such movies possible. June 1963, New York. The finished film unspools at roadshow length. Hours of gold leaf and political marriage, and a queen who understands leverage. Critics split along a fault line that still exists. Some see a serious adult drama trapped inside an invoice. Others see an invoice that learned to speak dialogue. Audiences come anyway. For the calendar year, it out-earns its rivals. The title works in the only language exhibitors fully trust.
The wound remains in the break-even. Theater splits, prints, advertising, Taylor's participation, the discarded English footage, the double construction, the years of interest on money that had to be found in a panic. All of it stacks a hurdle that ordinary success cannot clear on schedule. A film can lead the year's grosses and still leave a studio looking at empty stages and a deed transfer. Fox does not die in 1963. It survives by becoming smaller in the one way a film company is not supposed to become smaller. It sells the dirt. Mankiewicz is cut. The version that reaches most screens is shorter than the one he bled to assemble. Wanger is pushed to the margin of his own catastrophe. Taylor and Burton become a traveling industry. The lot's missing acres begin their second life as Century City, where the fantasies will be leases and floor plates instead of palaces. Nobody gets the ending they storyboarded. The company remains, the method that built it does not.
A studio is a strange kind of factory. Its inventory is imaginary, but its costs are as real as lumber, wages, film stock, and land taxes. For decades, the major lots pretended those two facts could be kept in separate ledgers. Make-believe would float the real estate. Real estate would wait patiently behind the facades. Cleopatra is the year that waiting ended. Not because anyone in 1960 sat down to invent a new philosophy of capital, but because an open production account forced a choice about what a film company is made of. After the crisis, Hollywood does not swear off the past. It swears off a certain way of owning the past. The runaway studio epic, financed as if time were free and weather were loyal, starts to look less like courage and more like an uninsured warehouse fire. Roadshow evenings continue for a while. Then they thin. Pictures get packaged through independents, through overseas money, through tax shelters, through later conglomerates that treat a studio as a library and a logo rather than a county of plaster streets.
When Fox later steadies itself on other hits, including a musical that arrives with tighter adult supervision, the recovery does not restore the missing acres. Recovery rarely returns the factory you sold to meet payroll. Walk those acres now and the aftertaste is almost polite. Lawyers cross what used to be a Western street. Glass repeats the sky where a second-unit army once raised dust. The towers are not a moral. They are a conversion. Imagination was converted into rent. Rent was converted into survival. Survival was converted into a story the industry tells about excess, usually with a laugh, as if the laugh could shrink the invoice. The deeper principle is colder than gossip about barges and lovers.
When an institution funds a dream by selling the ground that makes the next dream possible, it has admitted that the dream was never capitalized. It was borrowed from the future tense of its own body. Fox kept releasing movies. It did not keep the same body. That distinction matters anywhere a company confuses a famous project with a treasury, and anywhere a board treats an unfinished plan as safer than a smaller finished one.
The hunger that will fill seats for another historical epic has not died. It is scheduled again and again because audiences still want the past to look expensive enough to be true. The question that remains is not whether someone will build the barges. Someone will. The question is which asset gets quietly deeded away while the cameras roll, and whether the people signing the order can still tell the difference between a production and a liquidation. If the next queen is a hit, what will her city cost?